minus 1x. So 6x minus x. Just put 1x there to remind us that that's what that is. So we have 4 terms. Now we can factor by grouping. So we're going to give ourselves our groups. So once we have our groups, what do we do to find our first factor? What do we do to find our first factor? Look at me. Common factor, right? We look for the greatest common factor here. What's the greatest common factor in this first group? Yes, 2x. What's the greatest common factor in the second group? The only thing we have is a 1, but it's a negative 1, right? If there's no greatest common factor besides 1, we would use 1. Remember, anytime this is negative, we just pull out a negative factor. How am I going to find the second factor, Diane, you remember? Brandon? Very good. We divide this first group by the greatest common factor we pulled out. So we have x plus 3 left. So A would be our correct answer. I'm going to scroll up here for people who are watching this because they're absent. You can see the first problem we did was here on 24. You can pause it to copy it down. That way you can get credit for it. And this is the work for the first problem, number 22. If you need those two, I started our recording late. You can get those, pause it, and get that work. Yeah. All right, any questions on 25? All right, let's move on down. So sometimes they ask you for the solution to something. Sometimes they ask you to simplify something. Sometimes they ask you questions in a really strange way. This question is just ask you to find a solution for number 26. So looking at these two questions, it says, what is the solution set for this equation? So we just have to find the value of x. That would make, well, we're finding the solution, which remember, in a quadratic equation are the x-intercepts, right? We're finding the x value when y is 0. So notice, both of these are quadratic equations, and we know because there's an exponent of 2 on the variable. So both of these are quadratic equations. This one asks you for the solution set. That's what we did almost all the time when we solved quadratic equations. This one asks you for the sum of the two solutions to this quadratic equation. So we're going to start doing number 26, but basically they're testing the exact same material here, but then they're also asking you to pay attention to going one step further after you find the solution on number 27. Number 26, we have x squared minus 2x equals 24. We learned 3 ways to solve a quadratic equation earlier this year. One was by graphing, which we will never do unless we have access to a Decimus calculator. One way was by factoring. Not all quadratic equations can be solved by factoring, but if they can, there are certain forms, certain quadratic equations that are pretty easy to do. The third way is using the quadratic formula, and that way works every time. But takes a little bit more time. So this one, x squared minus 2x equals 24, whether we solve it by factoring or solve it by using the quadratic equation, we're going to put it into ax squared plus bx plus y equals 0 form. Okay, so we're going to get everything by, not plus y, plus c, might be, get it into that form, right? So we're going to put it into this form, and then we're going to see, would it be easy to factor? Or should we just go ahead and use the quadratic formula? So that's where we're going to start. X squared minus 2x equals 24. What do I have to do to get it in the standard form up here? Just subtract 24 from both sides because we want that right side to be 0. So now I have x squared minus 2x minus 24 equals 0. So now we need to decide, should we try to factor or should we just go ahead and use a quadratic formula? Well, at first glance, I'm inclined to think maybe I want to factor because this coefficient is 1. If this is factorable, it's really easy to do. You're just going to factor into two binomials, and then I set the factors equal to 0, and I solve. So to determine that, I'm going to look at my constant, and I'm going to look at the coefficient of my middle term. Are there two factors? Number one positive and one negative, so that's a negative 24. That if I multiply them, I get negative 24, but if I add them, I get negative 2. Anybody think there are there two factors that would work for? Yeah, 6 and 4. Now, which one has to be positive and which one has to be negative? We want a negative 2, right? So we want the bigger one to be negative. So negative 6 times positive 4 is negative 24, and negative 6 plus positive 4 is negative 2. So we can plug into here now. Remember, it's always going to be x times x in these kind of equations because that's the only way to get x squared. Now it's minus 6 plus 4. We're going to set these factors equal to 0. And solve these one-step equations. Add 6 to both sides, and x equals 6. Subtract 4 from both sides, and x equals negative 4. So we're looking for our solution step for number 26. Negative 4, positive 6. Negative 4, positive 6. So that is our first choice, A. Now, we're going to do something very similar here. So, if they asked us to find the sum of these two solutions, we would add 6 plus negative 4, and we get positive 2. They didn't ask us to do that there. But they are asking us to do this here. So now, not only do we have to find the two solutions, then we need to do what? What does the sum mean? Add, subtract, multiply, or divide? Add. So once we find the two answers, we don't give one of the answers, we add them together, and that is going to be A, B, C, or D. So x squared plus 4x minus 12 is already in the standard form. Is this one going to be easy to factor? Are there factors of 12, negative 12 rather, that we could add to get positive 4? 6 and 2, very good. So which will be, no, we don't, one has to be positive, one has to be negative. Which one's going to be positive, which one's going to be negative? Did you say 2 is going to be negative? Yes, so 2 is going to be negative, because this time that 4 is positive. So 6 times negative 2 is negative 12, 6 plus negative 2 is positive 4. So now we're going to rewrite as factors. It's x squared, so it's got to be x times x plus 6 minus 2. Once we have it factored, we set our factors equal to 0 and solve. So you think, okay, great, I'm done. Negative 6 and 2. There's no negative 6 and 2 up there. No negative 6 or positive 2, right? Because the question asks us to add them together. So negative 6 plus 2 equals negative 4. So that is a weird way to ask that question. question, but they're going to ask you questions in weird ways. I'm sure you're finding out how to be the case as well, and that's why we're practicing it out as much as we are. Okay. We're going to go on to number 28. Actually, we only got to 28 in first period. Let's go ahead and do 28. Which is a solution to this equation? X squared minus 6x equals negative 6. You'll notice the answer choices here. They're going to make it easy for me to decide, am I going to try to factor it, or am I going to use a quadratic equation? If they give you answer options with a square root in it, don't try to factor it. Okay, it can't be factored. These, we definitely are going to use the quadratic formula. If you look back at the reference sheet that I gave you earlier, and you will have this on the EOC, here is the quadratic formula. X equals the opposite of b plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times a. And it tells you here where ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So that tells you when you have a quadratic equation, you have to rewrite it in this form. And then you'll have your a, your b, and your c, and you use those to plug into the formula. So if there's a square root in your answer options, you're going to use the quadratic formula, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to use the quadratic formula. We're going to go ahead and write that. X equals the opposite of b plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2a. So I want to know, what is my a? What is my b? What is my c? I can't plug into here until I know those. So my equation, x squared minus 6x equals negative 6, is not in standard form, right? It's got to be in this form. That means I need to move what? What do I need to move to get it in that form? The negative 6 here on the right, the constant, right? So I'm going to add 6 to both sides. Now when I do, I can determine that my a is actually a 1 here. So remember, a is the coefficient on the x squared term. My b is negative 6, and my c is positive 6. So now that I know what these are, I can plug those into the quadratic formula and find the solution. It asks us for only one of the solutions here. So x equals the opposite of b. Well, b is negative 6. Remember, it's not negative b. It's the opposite of whatever b is. Plus and minus the square root of b squared, so negative 6 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 6. All divided by 2 times 1. So now we're going to simplify, and then we'll maybe use our Kaizen if we need to. So x equals the opposite of negative 6 is what? Positive 6. Good. Plus and minus, we're going to do this in a second, so the easy part first. 2 times 1 is 2, right? So we can do this part straight cross on our calculator. 6 negative buttons, x squared buttons, minus 4 times 1 times 6. If you do that, you should get 12. So we're getting pretty close to our answer. We do not want to turn this into a decimal because all of our answer choices had a square root symbol in it. So what we're going to do is we need to simplify and separate into two answers. First off, is negative 12, the square root of 12, that is simplified square root. What can we take out of it? Square root of 4, yeah, we can rewrite it as the square root of 4 times the square root of 3, and the square root of 4 is 2, right? So let's rewrite this as x equals 6 plus 2 square root of 3, plus or minus rather, all over 2. This means we can read two answers, so we're going to write it as x equals 6 plus 2 square root of 3 over 2, and x equals 6 minus 2 square root of 3 all over 2. There is no fraction in my answer choices, and that's because this answer is still not simplified. What can I do now to these two solutions? So if this denominator has a factor, is in both of this constant and the coefficient, we can simplify that, right? 6 divided by 2 is 3. It's just 1. 2 divided by 2 would be 1. So x equals 3 plus the square root of 3 is one of our solutions. Same thing here, even though it's minus. So 6 divided by 2, that would simplify to 3. 2 divided by 2, right, that would simplify to 1. So x equals 3 minus the square root of 3. If you look at the answer key for this online, I think the answer key is wrong. But this is the correct answer. So now, which of the answer choices would be a solution? A. So, yeah, x equals 3 minus the square root of 3. The answer key says C. But I think what happened is when that answer key was made, they made that a positive 6, it turned into a negative 12. But that is the correct answer. All right. We'll get out of here at 19. Okay. So we'll finish this one tomorrow. Yeah, we only have one more. I was thinking we had more than. Oh, no, I lied. We have the rest of that page. We'll finish that page tomorrow. If you've not finished your ALEX assignments, make sure you're working on those and you're redoing them until you get 100s because they're going to be quiz grades. Yes. Oh, thank you. Sounds fun. Should be able to handle that. You are a teenager in 2025.
But how many?
500.
You know the word.
Bye guys. See you tomorrow. Oh, you got your yellow form. I'll take it. Get your yellow form. I'll take it. Remember, it's got to be in by next Tuesday to excuse your absence.